want to eliminate all property tax, inside, outside millage, because we are tired of being just a renter from the government.
Ohio homeowners are getting crushed by the 7th highest property tax rates in the country. Home values here in Ohio are up 67% since 2020, but our income didn't follow. Ohioans paid over $22 billion in property taxes last year alone. And now a constitutional amendment to abolish property taxes in Ohio could be on the November ballot. After my first interview with the folks responsible for the constitutional amendment, I received a lot of questions from you, the viewer. Today, we're going to get some answers. We're going to walk through exactly what's in the amendment, what it means for Ohio homeowners, and where the current petition stands. Hey, Brian, how you doing today? Good morning. Welcome to the Housing Nerd.
Good morning, Jason. I appreciate very much the opportunity to talk to you about this amendment. And it's very, very important amendment for the citizens of the state of Ohio. If I can just give you a little introduction how I got started on this whole thing. It started over 10 years ago, and it was very innocent. Looking at my property tax bill, I'd been in my house 10 years, and I noticed that my property taxes had gone up 40% in the 10 years I'd been in the home. And I said, well, it's not sustainable if we stay on this path of ever increasing property taxes. We're going to price me out of my home. I'm not going to be able to afford it. So what I realized is I didn't know much about property taxes. So I put myself on a path to better understand property taxes. I contacted the state of Ohio and talked to the gentlemen. They were very kind and gracious and explained a lot to me. But one thing they said to me was, Brian, there's a lot of lobbyists down here at the Capitol. And they've got lobbyists for every group. But the only group that they don't have a lobbyist for are for citizens. So I thought about that and I said, maybe we should be lobbyists for citizens. Maybe we should, form a group. And I formed a 501c4 group to actually better understand property taxes. And I'm an accountant by training and a CPA. And so what I would do is I'd ask for public records requests. I'd ask for 3 to 5 years worth of financial statements to see if I can determine any trends in the taxing authority. And what I saw, specifically in Lake County, that's where I live, and what I found was a growing government. And I saw massive amounts of cash being retained by these taxing authorities. Deepwood had $65 million. Lake Metro Parks had $30 million. The Crime Lab, they were accumulating $1.6 million a year, more than they needed. And I kept asking questions. I asked the prosecutor, well, why are you accumulating $1.6 million a year, more than you need? He said, well, I don't have to go back to the taxpayers for 15 years because I'll have so much cash. I said to the commissioners, you cannot continue to suck the lifeblood out of the community by overtaxing these people to put it in your rainy day fund so that you feel comfortable and then you can continue to operate without having to go back to the taxpayers and justifying your existence. I said to myself, well, if I saw that, in Lake County, it's got to be happening in other places as well. We formed, we now have, lobbyists for citizens. We've got multiple people that are going, to the various taxing authorities and trying to get as much information as we can to get the information back to the taxpayers. We went down to the State House. We spoke before the House Ways and Means Committee. We spoke before the Committee to Reform and Review Property Taxes. We were totally disillusioned. I tried to reach out to my state representative, named is Jamie Callender. I tried to reach out to the other rep, Dan Troy. He was a little more receptive. Then I tried to reach out to Senator Serino. And what I found out from Senator Serino, he said, well, Brian, if seniors can't afford their property taxes, they should sell their house and move into an apartment. I found that appalling. So we as individuals, and as a group, we were trying to get an audience with our representatives because we were always under the impression That's what this whole representative republic is all about. That they are supposed to be sitting down, talking to us so that we can address any of the grievances that we have. But no one was willing to sit down. When we spoke to the committee to review and reform, that's the one that spent 2 years, that committee, and did absolutely nothing. They censored my speech when I was about to tell them that a school district, Willoughby East Lake School District here in Lake County, was about to receive $8 million because of the revaluation in the valuation of the properties. They were going to get $8 million a year. They played classical music over what I was saying. We collectively as a group, we said, these guys are not listening. They don't care about the average citizen. It is not a Democrat or Republican issue. Home ownership is the foundation of our freedom and liberty. It is how families get out of poverty, by transferring wealth from one generation to the next. They've got such a convoluted, complex property tax system. The citizens don't understand it, and many legislators don't understand it. And I spoke to the current Secretary of State. He didn't even understand the 20 mil floor. I find that appalling. So how can legislators write laws when they don't even understand the current laws? People ask us, our amendment is very simple. We want to eliminate all property tax. Inside, outside millage, gone. Because we are tired of being just a renter from the government. We spent 30, 40 years paying off our mortgage, but we still have an annual payment to the government for property taxes. And some people say, well, Brian, how are you going to pay for all this? When I tell people about, this, they say, well, Brian, you have to do it for the schools. You have to have property taxes. You got to do it for schools. And I said, well, have you taken a look at the proficiency scores of the schools? Do you recognize that some kids can't even read or write? They don't teach cursive anymore. Phonics aren't taught in most school districts. I say, does that bother you? And then people just sort of shrug. You got to do it for the kids. The other reason they say, Brian, you got to vote for property taxes because it keeps the values of your home high. And I said, no, wait a minute. Do you understand unrealized gains? If I bought the house for $100,000 and it's now worth $300,000, why should I be paying tax on $300,000? People scratch their head, don't understand unrealized gains, don't understand property taxes. So we have a real education problem. I've had some discussion with our local township. I live in Concord Township. The township administrator, Mr. Andy Rose, he and I have a good working relationship. He's been very, cordial. We agree to disagree, but he says, Brian, I'm going to pay for police and fire, roads and bridges. I said, Andy, just send me a bill. Just don't tie it to my house. The local taxes can be paid by fees, by sending a bill directly, but it shouldn't be tied to the value of my home. Why should I pay more or less than my neighbor because my property value is higher or lower for police and fire? Why aren't we paying the same?
Recently, I did an interview with Beth Blackmark. Just explain how you are connected with Beth's group and what the difference is or what the similarities are so the viewers understand that.
We all have the same agenda. The head of their group is a gentleman by the name of Keith Davey. Keith is one of the 5 members of our committee that filed the amendment to eliminate the property taxes. And there are other groups. Sarah Wolf down in Hamilton County. There's Lizzie Keach, in Licking County. So we have these various patriotic groups in various counties that are all working on the same. Beth just doesn't happen to be part of the committee that filed the amendment with the Attorney General and the Secretary of State, but we're all working on the same team with the same objective. And Keith, who is, I understand, the leader of their group, he is part of the committee.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, so you've got multiple groups kind of working together.
It's a true grassroots effort.
We know that the amendment would abolish all property taxes.
Correct.
The biggest question I get, and after doing the interview with Beth, I got a lot of comments, and the biggest question I got was, how are you going to pay for the schools? How are you going to pay for the roads? How are you going to pay for everything that goes into property taxes? Can you provide the viewers any type of, context around that?
Yeah, first and foremost, the Ohio Constitution says that the state of Ohio is responsible for funding the schools. We have on record Governor DeWine saying that he was not for our amendment. I think he said it was idiotic or something like that. And he said that the schools are funded primarily by income tax and by property taxes. But at the same breath, we now hear that there is an initiative, and it's been going on for quite some time, to eliminate all income taxes. So I say, and I wrote an article, I said, well, if Governor DeWine is correct in that the income tax and the property taxes are the main sources for school funding, and they want to eliminate income tax, ergo that tells me that there's going to be an even greater, a greater enforcement of property taxes for schools. If you have income or property and they're eliminating income taxes, therefore you're going to have more property taxes. My concern is, as there is an entity called the Budget Commission. Every county has a budget commission. It's made up of the prosecutor, auditor, and the treasurer. Their role should be to be the watchdog for the taxpayers to ensure that the taxing authorities are not collecting excessive taxes on the property taxes. Here in Lake County, and I dare say it's probably in most counties, maybe Geauga County is an exception, that it's nothing more than a rubber stamp. There is no one, and I mean no one at the county level that is looking out for the average taxpayer. No one in Lake County ever says we need to give money back to the taxpayers. It is never enough. We're building a fabulous jail here. There's going to be $250 million, and we need a jail, but it's $250 million. And I said, to the commissioners, I said, I've never had anybody tell me I've got to move to Lake County because we've got a great jail. And what I see in California is going to happen here in Ohio. And that is the price of homes are going to be so high that the American dream of home ownership is going to be just a memory. The younger generations cannot afford the homes. So what they'll do is they will provide, affordable housing. And that's the term that I hear all the time now. And you can hear it in Senator Serino. You can't afford the taxes, sell your home and move into an apartment. Apartments are now going to be, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000. How can the average citizen, do that? So I would say it's not generating revenue in the state is not a problem. If they eliminate the income tax, there's going to be a heavier emphasis on property taxes, which is going to further compound the problem for many of our seniors and those living on fixed income. But unless we do, as I guess they say at the local level, or at the federal level, we got to do it at the local level. We got to have a DOGE. We've got to look at these taxing authorities and the school districts. How do we provide these same services at less cost? It can't be more and more cost. We can't, if we're spending on average $17,000, $18,000 per pupil, are we going to get any better results if we spend $50,000 per pupil? At what point in time do we stop?
Being taxed on that unrealized gain seems to be one of, for me anyway, in my brain, the biggest sticking point of all, because there's no control over it, right? It's not based on income. It's not based on what you buy. So if we switch to if income tax went up, if sales tax went up, so when I bought a candy bar, it would go up, my tax, instead of being 7% or 6% or 8%, depending on where you live, it would be 13% maybe. I don't know. That's obviously not something I want to pay necessarily at the register. However, I can control if I buy that candy bar or not. If I go out and buy a car, I can control that. If you're a senior citizen, or not even a senior citizen, just somebody who is on a fixed income, or just a family trying to make it, you're like, man, I didn't cause any of these taxes to go up. So that's the first thing I hear from a lot of people in real estate is the unrealized gain is a problem. And then, and then the second part though, and I want your opinion on this, Brian. The second part is, just because property values go up, why would school expenses go up?
Yeah, there is one other thing that people do not understand, and I'm sure you do, Jason, because you're in the business, and that is what we have seen is that with the sexennial or triennial revaluations, that there are third-party companies that are determining our destiny by this mass appraisal method that they are using for each county. So they are, controlling our destiny with the valuation of our homes, but they're not accountable to us. When we try to ask the questions, well, why is my house worth this? They give you some, lame excuse, and we say, well, we want to see the details. You can't see the details because that's all proprietary information. That's not acceptable. So
Right.
the whole thing is so convoluted, and then they tell us, well, Brian, you are responsible to tell us where we're wrong. So I've got to go out and I've got to hire for anywhere from $400 to $700 a professional appraiser to come in and tell me my house is worth this. And then invariably what happens if I go before the board of review, they'll throw me a bone. If they raised it 100,000, they'll say, well, we'll only raise it, 50,000. And I'm supposed to walk away and, feel good about that. It's all wrong because that's my home. I'm not a renter to the government, and I want the government to keep their hands off my home. I don't know why that's so difficult for legislators to understand that. Because what has happened though, they're comfortable in it's always been done this way. If you try to make some sort of change, oh my gosh, you're against the kids or you're against senior centers. And I'm saying, no, we have to rethink this. It is not sustainable. Do we want to go back to the actual roots of individual liberty and freedom? If that's not what we want, then we are going to consign future generations. And we're saying that the property taxes are going to compound the problem. And they've got to come up with either sales or income tax or some type of other system. And they're saying, well, we don't have enough time. They've had plenty of time. They've had, decades since the DeRolf case. I think it was in 76 or something like that where the Supreme Court said, the property taxes were unconstitutional. They haven't done anything about it. And that's what we hired them for, to go down there and fix the problem.
The part you just mentioned about, and I got comments on this, that, hey, this was already ruled unconstitutional in the state of Ohio, correct?
Correct.
And this was in the 70s, you're saying?
Yeah, the Rolf case. They can look it up.
But obviously that's just been ignored.
That's basically right. I think the court system basically, sort of threw up its hands and, threw it back to the legislators. And if you were to talk to legislators, they would say, well, we have solved that, that DeRolf case. I don't see that because the recent budget for the state of Ohio is now like $100 billion. And it's so funny. They always say we end up with a balanced budget. Well, what does that mean? I think 4 or 5 years ago, it was like 70 million. And now they've got, a few years later, they're now got 100 billion, but it's balanced. No, what that means is they continue to spend. Why can't they operate the state the way it was with 70 billion?
I do want to cover the question that the folks have around the homestead exemption.
Right.
So from what I understand from reading the material and doing research, and I know what a homestead exemption is. I see it on tax bills. I talk to clients about it. It's something, as a real estate investor, I look at properties that already have the exemption in, and if I'm going to own it as a landlord, I obviously have to remove that because I don't qualify for it if I'm being a landlord on the property. So I understand it, but it seems like it's outdated, ineffective, and the discount, from what I researched, was only like $450.
I can't remember when I got it. It was quite a number of years ago, but I was sort of grandfathered in where I'm not subject to any income limitation. But now they introduce something that it's now limited. I don't know, $25,000, $35,000, $45,000, but it's really peanuts in the scheme of things of what it really means to the senior on this homestead exemption. And it sounds good, for the politicians that say, well, we raised this thing $5,000. Well, that may be $20 a month or something, which means really nothing. So we're saying just try to blow smoke our way and say that you're doing something for the seniors and with the homestead exemption when you're not. And the other thing that bothers me is when I take a look at my tax bill locally, I say, well, I have to pay $2,000 to Concord Township. I don't know how much I'm paying for police. I don't know how much I'm paying for fire, roads and bridges. I'm saying to them, I want a breakdown on that. I want to know, how efficient are you? Because if I'm paying $500 a year for fire protection, I want to know what the other communities, how much they're charging. They won't do that because they do not want that revealed. They do not want the exposure of how efficient they are in providing these services. So what they do is they just give you a lump sum on your property tax bill, and you're supposed to be satisfied with that. And what bothers me is that people are satisfied. No one stands up and said, that's not acceptable. I want to know how much I'm paying. I'm
Right.
not very well liked because I'm challenging all of these, what we're doing. I'm saying I'm just not going to sit back and have you take my money without giving me what I think I need to determine whether you, as an administrator or an elected official, are doing right by the people.
So do you think this amendment, do you think it's going to force, it sounds like, and I asked Beth this question too, and she thought it would just force the legislators to deal with this thing. Like it would put a shot across their bow that they're like, wow, if the citizens repeal this, like we're just going to have to just deal with it because the schools and the counties have to get funding from somewhere.
Yeah, Jason, I look at it this way, and that is, we've already had some wins in this process. And by wins, I'm talking about a year ago, no one would even talk to us at all about this. Well, now when the citizens say enough is enough, we're mad as hell and we're not going to take it anymore, now they're starting to talk. I now see that they have a piece of legislation to eliminate the inside millage. Would they have done that without the citizens stepping up and going to the Attorney General or going to the ballot board and taking the time to redress our grievances? Wouldn't they have done that? I don't think so. And I was asked by the Township Association to speak to their group. And I initially said, sure, we'd love to, talk to anybody, any group. But then they said, well, Brian, you can't record this. And I said, I'm sorry, but transparency is the key to good governance. I'm not going to get involved where the average citizen cannot hear and see what is happening behind closed doors. That's not acceptable to the average citizen anymore. We're not going to take that. So when they told me that I couldn't record the session, I respectfully backed out and from that township association because, again, as I said, transparency, is a key.
Just to clarify, Brian, this amendment would remove all property tax from every situation, right? Because a lot of people are like, this won't remove commercial property tax, or it's only for senior citizens, or they say you should have a tax on a landlord like me on a non-owner occupied home, but on an owner occupied home should not have property tax. But this amendment is complete removal, correct?
Complete 100% removal, whether you're a homeowner, a commercial establishment, it would be all gone. It is interesting. What I've heard is that, well, Brian, if you eliminate the property taxes, you're going to be helping those with the commercial establishments and all the people with the big money. And I said, no, I don't agree. The people with the money that can make the investments, they view that as a cost of doing business. And that cost is passed on to the renters. Many renters feel that they don't pay property taxes, which is 100% incorrect. In Lake County, 40% of the people do not even see their tax bill. And this was told to me by the treasurer and the county auditor because the tax bill is sent to their mortgage company. The only time that the people will see the increase or know about an increase, the mortgage company says, gee, we need more money in escrow, or you've got, there's going to be a $200 a month additional. Well, why am I paying more? It's because of your property taxes. And most people just sort of shrug their shoulders, as you say, death and taxes. And I'm saying to the people, those days are over. Don't just accept that. That's your home. So when are we going to get a backbone and say to these politicians, it's not acceptable anymore. Keep your hands off my home.
Right. Yeah, agreed. That's a great stat. I did not know that. But it's very logical. My father is retired. He's in his 80s, lives in the same house that I grew up in. He called me, well, I don't know, a few months ago and said, hey, I got my new mortgage statements. House is almost paid off. And he said, but my payment went up a lot. I wonder why. Can you help me? And it was because of insurance for a small portion, but a lot of it was property taxes. You're right. A lot of people never see it because the escrow just goes up. So they're like, oh, I guess I just have to make a payment. And if they have it on auto pay, they get a call one day from the bank saying you're late. And you're like, what do you mean I'm late? How am I late? I pay it every month, auto draft. No, it's gone up. What I am seeing, Brian, I am seeing more and more tax foreclosures in Licking County here. I'm seeing more properties go into tax foreclosure because there is no forbearance on taxes. There is no, can I set up some type of reduced payment plan? It's you pay or we're going to foreclose. And the fees and the interest and the penalties on property taxes that are late, they are huge.
We're talking to groups, and we've been down to Licking County, and we're talking to groups. We say, well, how many people own their home? Invariably, about 80% raise their hands. Say, well, yeah, we just paid off the mortgage, or, we now own our home. And we say, I'm sorry, but you're just a renter to the government. And when we say that, the light bulb goes on and said, well, he's right. We're just really just renters. And that wasn't part of the bargain when I bought my home. And I'm just saying to people, at what point in time do we push back? Can the state of Ohio, do we have the leaders in the state of Ohio to say we're going to do something different? We are going to restore freedom and liberty in this state. Or are we going to be one of those states that continue to lose population where we've got the super rich and we've got everybody else? We're speaking out on behalf of the average citizen.
Let's go back to the amendment and let's pretend that you get enough people to sign the petition. You get enough signatures. You need 400,000. I understand that you're moving towards that goal. Are you confident you're going to hit that 400,000 number? Do you think you will?
If we do not, yes, I'm confident we're doing it. It's just a matter of when. It will be a real challenge to get it by July 1st. But we are going to continue, and we will get it on in 2026. So we're saying to legislators, okay, we'll give you the warning now that if you don't do something that is significant, and I really mean significant, none of this raising the household, exemption $5,000 or something like that, so that people can live in their homes. We're going to take it all. And people say, well, Brian, what are we going to do? Well, that's a decision that the people are going to have to make when it's on the ballot. Do we want freedom and liberty, or do we want to be just serfs to the government? That's really basically it. If we were to get it on a ballot in 2025, it would take effect January 1st of 2026. If we get it on the ballot in May of 2026, it will take effect January 1st of 2027. So the legislators have quite some time to roll up their sleeves and think long and hard about freedom and liberty for the citizens of the state of Ohio.
Okay, so that makes sense. So I basically what you're saying is I still have to pay my property taxes here in a month. Yeah, I still have to right now. Now, I still got to pay.
I wish we could, expedite it, for all the people, but there's limitations, and that's
I'm just kidding. I know I got to pay him. I was kidding with Beth, and I said, so I guess I was kind of looking forward to July instead of not looking forward to it because that's when all the property taxes are due, and I'm like, oh boy, I got to write all these checks.
But Jason, have you received any calls from the 80-year-olds that can't afford their property taxes? We have. Yes. We've recorded them, and we've even taken one lady to the treasurer in Lake County, and the treasurer's hands are tied. I mean, I don't blame him, but he's working out a monthly payment plan. And I said, well, that's great, but it's they still can't afford the payments.
Right. Yeah. A lot broken up is still a lot. Right.
Yeah.
So then the other thing was another theory by folks that I hear is that this is going to increase property values substantially. Because I'm not so sure they're wrong on this, because if I'm for instance, a first-time home buyer, and I guess normal situation, I graduate school or I get off on my own, and I'm gonna decide to buy a house when I become an adult, and I'm out there looking for a house, and in one case right now, I can't afford a $200,000 house in Licking County on my salary because the principal and interest is one part, but the taxes and insurance make it unaffordable completely. Now, with no property tax in that mix, that's a $500 payment I'm not making, or $200 or $300 payment, and all of a sudden that home becomes affordable for me on a payment basis, and therefore that demand naturally drives up home prices. I'm not saying that's necessarily going to happen, but I'm curious if you guys have talked about that at all.
No, I can't say that we really have, and maybe it's a supply and demand issue. I mean, maybe there's with more houses, being built. My goodness, I see online they talk about tiny houses where they now want people to live in, I don't know, 350 square feet or something like that, which seems a little. That's not my idea of an American dream.
Oh.
But I can tell you what is the American dream. When my friend Leonard and Gilbert and I went down to the state capitol, we tried to talk to legislators. We had to spend $50. They forced us to rent a room at the Capitol. We paid $50. We were asking for some cables so that we could tie into their computer system. Well, that was going to cost us more money. Legislators never showed up, but they sent, I think there were 6 legislative aides. Not one of the legislative aides was older than 35. So I'm going on my spiel of the American dream, and then it dawned on me, maybe our American dream in my generation, and I happen to be 79, so the generation that I'm in, our American dream is probably a lot different than the American dream of those under 30, and that I find that to be sad. And how do we bring back that American dream? Well, it's a societal problem, in my opinion.
I think there's a lot of younger folks out there that are they feel completely locked out of the housing market, and right, wrong, or indifferent, Brian, a lot of them will blame landlords like me. They blame large and institutional, Wall Street type investors. A lot of them do blame baby boomers for that. They seem to be the target. They've ignored Generation X, which I am. We've kind of forgotten about, I guess. But they pick on baby boomers and say, these folks have had it easy, and now they are able to, live their life and do their thing. And it's odd to me because my father didn't, he's retired, but he managed his money correctly. He doesn't spend any money on anything. And he was able to retire in his little house. And this isn't about him being wealthy. He's not. It's about, just like you said, not renting his house from the government forever.
Unfortunately, Jason, though, we've talked to a lot of people in the baby boomers age. And we say to them, we talk about property taxes, and far too many of them, Jason, will say, well, I can pay my property taxes. And then we say to them, well, what about your neighbor? Their response?
Right.
Their response is, that's their problem. That is a very telling tale on our society. That's their problem. So as long as I've got my bases covered, I'm not worried about the other guy. I find that it's just not acceptable to me. But what if we have senators? What if we have representatives? What if that's their attitude? They've got their bases covered, and they're part of this government bureaucracy that, it's just pulling in all this money from the private sector. The public sector is outgrowing the private sector's ability to pay for the services. And we're raising, our group we're raising the warning flag and say, this is not sustainable.
It's not. And I know that there are people that There are a lot of foreclosures on from taxes, from people not being able to pay taxes. I talk to a lot of individuals who own homes that cannot afford their taxes, and that's why they're moving.
It's exactly what I was going to say. They're leaving Ohio. So
Yep.
we're saying to the Republicans that, you're controlling this state. Doesn't that bother you that people are having to leave your state? What are you going to be left with?
Agreed. And I have received I just saw one last night where an individual said, hey, if there's no property tax in Ohio, I'll pack my bags today. I don't even know where they lived. I'll move to Ohio tomorrow. Not only that, but industry and business will then flock to Ohio as well. And if the revenue is made up by income tax and sales tax, and you've got more businesses coming to Ohio and doing better, then theoretically that would give us the money we need.
Stream will increase. That's our stance on it, Jason, and we're waiting for any of the reps to prove us wrong.
What about delinquencies? So from a tax delinquency standpoint, if I am delinquent on my taxes by 3 years and I can't pay them, and I haven't been lucky enough not to get foreclosed on, what if they eliminate property taxes? Are all those delinquencies forgiven? I guess they are, right?
When we're saying that the property tax is not allowed, they're not allowed as of January 1st, either of 2026 or 2027. So the answer to your question was, I don't know if we can go back retroactively and save the bacon of those that, haven't paid their property taxes. I wish we could wave the magic wand and, make it all disappear, but that seems highly unlikely to me. And what we're doing is we're talking about future property taxes and not necessarily past property taxes.
Do you know, or have you been in contact with any other states about this? And the second part of the question is, have you been in touch with individuals on another YouTube channel, Real Estate Mindset? And there's a gentleman, Travis, and another guy, Mitch, who are like all hands on deck when it comes to property taxes in Texas.
Yeah, that's Mitch. I think it's Mitch Vexler you're talking about. I also have watched his YouTube videos, and he's doing an outstanding job in Texas. No, we have not spoken directly to Mr. Vexler. Maybe that would be a good idea for us to do that. But we have been talking to a young lady in Michigan who's been trying to eliminate the property taxes in the state of Michigan. She's been on this journey for like 4 years, and she still hasn't been successful in getting it on the ballot. But I dare say if we are able to get it on the ballot, I think we are going to, maybe that this will be a movement for the rest of the country on property taxes, because it's not, if it's happening in Ohio, it's got to be happening in other states. And again, we're a country founded on freedom and liberty.
How does an individual, if they're like in wherever, Indiana or whatever, how were you able to, or how was Beth and her group able to get that approved by the Attorney General, Dave Yost, I believe? How did that get approved? How did you approach that? It seems like you went around everything that was conventional and got it in somehow. How did that happen?
When you look at the state of Ohio revised code, they do not make it easy. They don't give you a format to follow. There's things that are written in the Ohio Revised Code, but there's an awful lot of interpretations. What we did was we talked to some groups that had previously filed petitions for constitutional amendments. And I'll just tell you, I'm not real excited about using the Constitution like the Ohio Revised Code. If it's been changed 176 times or something like that, that's a serious problem. But be that as it may, what we did was we got an example of a petition package. We followed that petition package format, and we had stops and starts, but we finally got a petition package that we felt comfortable with. We had the citizens initiative. We got 1,800 signatures. We only need 1,000. We walked all the way. We walked into the building in Columbus at the Attorney General's office. We weren't treated very kindly at all. Again, as we pull the curtain back on this whole thing, our whole constitutional republic at the state level, they're not worried about the citizens. But we got the Attorney General to say, yes, we got 1,000 valid signatures. They then sent it to the Secretary of State's office, what they call the ballot board. We did go down and we did speak in front of the ballot board. It was Secretary of State LaRose was heading up that committee. like 20, 25-minute meeting, and they said that our constitutional amendment was one constitutional amendment. That's why we did not have many other things of how are we going to solve the problem. That would have been more constitutional amendments, which would have been more work, more signatures. We said, we're going to make this real simple. We're not going to give you any property taxes. Once they approved that, and then I asked the question before the ballot board, and they said, well, we'll talk to you afterwards to answer those questions. And the questions were, and they did, the questions were, if we don't get it on the ballot for November 2025, may we carry these signatures over to 2026? And they said, yes, we can. So we then knew that we are on this path that we will definitely collect those signatures. There's been enough people throughout the state of Ohio that have been contacting us, and we're going to try to do a better job. We'll be at county fairs. We'll be at where we can collect massive amount of signatures. And we don't get it on for 25. We'll get it on for 2026. We're telling legislators, you're going to have over a year to solve the problem. You need to get to work for the people of the state of Ohio.
Interesting story that how you approach that on the petition and an amendment level, and obviously the fact that you have all the way until to get it on the ballot in 2026, even if it doesn't make it this year. I would think, yeah, it's probably a foregone conclusion with, well, I don't know how many people in Ohio, 12 million or something, that you're going to be able to get the 400,000 signatures. So for the folks watching this, the viewers, know that there'll be links in the description of this video that you can go to. I posted the latest locations where you can sign the petition. I posted that in a Google Drive, and I received those from Beth Blackmar. I also have Brian's contact information in the description.
The website that we're continuing to work on is axohiotax.com. It's AXOH tax.com. We're continuing to update that, and Beth does a great job of scheduling the events, and we'll continue that through the next 6 months or so.
Yeah, because you have to sign it in person. You
Yes.
can't sign it online. I've had a lot of people say, send me the link to sign it. And I'm like, well, no, you got to go to the actual location. There's a ton of locations set up. And Brian, I know you're busy with this petition. This was awesome. I'm sure the viewers got a lot of questions answered they had about this amendment and the taxes in Ohio, property taxes. And, who knows, like you said, it may start a movement across the United States. And
if they have any questions for me directly, I created a Gmail account, stoppropertytaxes@gmail.com. So it's stoppropertytaxes@gmail.com. If they have any direct questions for me, I will try my best to answer their questions and provide them with anything they need. Jason, I thank you so much for this opportunity.
Hey, I thank you, Brian. You're welcome. And I know the viewers are very thankful for this education today.
Thank you very much.